Hey, Soul Stories fam. We're starting a new love journey. Tell us where you're watching from. Don't forget to subscribe and join our family. Now stay with us. The story begins. The church bells rang 3 long times low, echoing and cold like metal pressed to skin. The sounds seeped into Emery's chest like a countdown to a new life she had never dreamed of, never chosen, yet was forced to walk into. Outside the stained glass window, the afternoon light spilled across the old stone floor, giving everything a weary golden hue. She stood there in the small room behind the sanctuary, her hands intertwined so tightly her knuckles had turned white. The lace dress her mother once hoped she would wear, when you finally find the man you love, was now nothing more than armor to face a brutal truth. Today's wedding had nothing to do with love. Emery Collins was 23 and about to become the wife of a man she had met exactly 3 times, a name every financial and social newspaper knew well. Sebastian Walker, the youngest CEO in Walker Industries history. Cold, perfect, emotionless, scandal-free, and according to rumor, heartless. She tightened her grip on the dress and drew a slow breath. For her family, for her father's company, for the dozens of employees standing at the edge of unemployment. All she had to do was say, "I do," and Walker Industries would inject capital, keeping the Collins family business from collapsing. A soft knock tapped against the door. "Emery, it's time." It was her father's voice, tired, raspy, but gentle. She opened the door. He looked at her as though this moment had aged him 10 years. "You look beautiful," he said, but guilt clouded his eyes, the guilt of a father leading his daughter into a life no one wanted. Emery linked her arm with his. Every step toward the grand doors of the church was a step away from youth, from freedom, from the quiet dreams she once held. The doors opened, and she saw him. Sebastian stood tall before the altar, as if this were just another press conference. Black suit, gray tie, broad shoulders, tall frame, and a sharply defined face sculpted by sea wind in cold granite. But it was his eyes, steel gray, that nearly stopped Emery's breath. Not because they were frightening, but because they were empty. The gaze of someone familiar with loss, with being hurt, with shutting every emotion behind locked doors long ago. But then, when his eyes paused on her slightly trembling hands, there was a flicker. A brief second, as fleeting as lightning behind storm clouds, where something in his eyes shifted. A hint of softness, a hint of concern. She couldn't tell. Emery's breath faltered, and just as quickly he turned back into stone. The officiant recited the vows. Soft murmurs, the shifting footsteps of the elderly. The scent of white flowers lingered like a farewell more than a blessing. Emery heard everything as though through thick glass. "Do you, Emery Marie Collins?" She looked at her father, at the hope mixed with apology in his eyes. She looked at the row where her father's former employees sat, their trust quietly placed on her shoulders. She lifted her chin, took a long breath, and said, "I do." Her voice rang so clearly she felt it drop into a hollow place deep inside her chest. Then came Sebastian's turn. He didn't look at her when he answered. His eyes stayed fixed on the officiant, his voice steady and inhumanly controlled, like a man signing a $1 billion contract. "I do." No hesitation, no tremor, no emotion. Perfect, and heartbreakingly distant. "You may now kiss the bride." Emery barely had time to inhale before Sebastian leaned in, a very light touch. So light that just as she felt the warmth of his lips, it was gone. A kiss by requirement. Yet it sent a shiver down Emery's spine. Maybe because her heart was wound too tight. Maybe because at that distance she caught the faint scent of cedarwood and sea, cold but breathtakingly alluring. Or maybe, because in that single second their lips touched, she sensed something faint in his breath, a lost, wandering shard of a soul trying to keep its distance. He stepped back, not sparing her another glance. "Mrs. Walker." He extended his hand for hers. Polite, nothing more. "Mrs. Walker," he murmured, just loud enough for her alone. The title nearly knocked Emery off balance. Not because it was sweet, but because it felt strange, like she had just stepped into a name that didn't belong to her, a name belonging to a life she had never chosen. She placed her hand in his. His fingers were cold, hers were trembling. And in that moment, Emery understood a bitter truth. They were getting married, but both were prepared to lose themselves in the process. And neither of them knew that this contract marriage was about to break their hearts before it ever saved them. The coastal road along North Carolina stretched before them, the late afternoon sunlight scattering gold ribbons across the water. Sebastian's beach house, or rather their beach house, stood solid like something out of a magazine. White walls, pale blue roof, and more than 10 windows facing the ocean. Beautiful enough that anyone would call it paradise. But to Emery, it felt like a gilded prison, wide, luxurious, and chillingly empty. The moment the door opened, she heard the sound of typing. No greeting, no, we're finally here. No smile, just the cold, familiar rhythm of a CEO who worked 16 hours a day. Sebastian stood at the desk by the window, back straight, hands over his laptop, his face washed in golden light. He didn't look at her when he spoke. Your room is on the second floor. If you need anything, talk to the housekeeper. Polite, perfect, distant. Emery tightened her grip on her bag, her fading smile barely hanging on. The first day passed as if they were two co-workers stuck together on a business trip. Sebastian, working, calling, reviewing documents, walking down the hallway with a Bluetooth in his ear, stepping out to the balcony to talk to some department head in that deep, cool, emotionless voice. Emery, wandering the house, looking at the beach, making herself a glass of lemonade, then sitting alone on the porch for hours. Sometimes she heard his shoes crossing the living room. Steady steps, never hesitant, never toward her. She heard the soft click of his office door closing, a sound that echoed like a period. The place was beautiful. Soft ocean breeze, white walls, the scent of new wood. But there was no human warmth, no life, no him. By the second night's dinner, Emery decided she should at least try to create something faintly resembling a marriage. She chose a soft pastel blue dress and walked downstairs, holding on to the tiny hope that he would look at her for longer than 2 seconds. He did look, for a second and a half. You're down, he said, announcing timing, not presence. Emery pressed her lips together and sat across from him. 2 silver plates, 2 glasses of white wine, 2 strangers. The weather's nice today, he said as he cut his fish, glancing up briefly before looking back down. She nearly dropped her fork. The weather. The literal definition of romance is killing small talk. Yeah, the ocean's beautiful, Emery replied. Her voice shrank. And that was the end of it. She counted time by the waves. 3 nights later, she tried again. The ocean's gorgeous tonight. Do you want to take a walk? I have work to finish. You've been working since morning. Work doesn't wait. No sharpness, no colder than usual. Just nothing. A human-shaped void. Emery swallowed her sadness. She wasn't the kind of wife who demanded romance. She didn't need passionate kissing or dramatic affection. But at the very least, she wished he would look at her like she was a person. On the 5th evening, she decided not to give up. He was standing in the hallway just off a call, pulling off his earpiece when he saw Emery blocking his path. Smaller by a whole head, but her gaze had never been more resolute. Sebastian, he stopped. You don't have to be this cold. Sebastian raised a brow, his storm gray eyes reflecting the warm hallway lights. I'm not cold. I'm just keeping distance. That is cold. He said nothing for 3 seconds. Then in a low, tired voice, distance is what's best for us, Emery. For us or for you? His jaw tightened, a rare hint of emotion. For both. Trust me. I don't understand, she said, stepping closer. We're married. We're on our honeymoon. I'm not asking you to love me. I just want... Emery. His voice cut gently, not loud but strong enough to extinguish the fragile hope inside her. We signed an agreement. You know that. I know that. We both have our reasons, and the best thing is to keep clear boundaries. And if I don't want distance? Sebastian paused. For half a second, something flickered in his eyes. Confusion? Fear? Longing? But he extinguished it instantly. You should want it, he said flatly, because I can't give you what you're hoping for in a marriage. This is the safest way. Then he walked away, his shadow stretching across the wooden floor like a cold, slicing line. Emery returned to her room and locked the door. Not because she feared anyone entering, but because she feared she couldn't hide her red eyes if someone did. The master bedroom was so large that even her breath echoed. The big bed with its soft white sheets, the plush pillows, the wide windows overlooking the ocean. Everything was breathtaking. Yet to Emery, it felt like a stage where she had to play the role of the satisfied wife, while her heart shattered piece by piece. She sat at the edge of the bed, hands on her lap, fingers trembling. Silence washed over her like a dark wave. Emery pulled her knees up, wrapped her arms around them, curling into herself as if it were the only shield she had. Her shoulders shook, and a quiet sob escaped, bouncing off the distant walls, as if the room was too large to hide a heart longing for love but denied it. Emery had never wanted wealth. She only wanted love. A home filled with laughter, with warm morning glances. A real marriage. Even though she knew this was a contract marriage, even though Sebastian had promised nothing, even though his heart was trapped by a painful past, she had still hoped. Still, he believed a small part of him might open. She still wanted to feel the gentleness of the man she called her husband. But tonight, she had been rejected outright, pierced by a cold, clean, keep your distance. The ocean outside continued to crash, wave after wave. But to Emery, each wave felt like a mirror reflecting her heart, breaking, scattering, breaking again. She cried until her eyelids felt like lead, cried for the dreams of her youth, cried for the marriage she wished for, but life refused to give her. Cried for the man with storm-gray eyes, a man she hadn't even had the chance to love, yet her heart already leaned toward him. She cried until exhaustion blurred everything, until sobs turned into shaky breaths, until the ocean became an unwilling lullaby to her abandoned heart. A honeymoon, the beginning of love for most, was becoming a cruel reminder that she wasn't a wife. Only an accessory to a contract Sebastian wanted to keep as clean as possible. No hugs, no hand-holding, no lingering glances, no us. Only him and her, two parallel lines that would never meet. Emery closed her eyes, tears soaking her pillow. She prayed tomorrow would hurt less, prayed that someday he would see her, truly see her. But she didn't know that. Sebastian stood by the glass door, one arm resting against the frame. The lamp on his desk had been off for hours, but his laptop still glowed, proof he hadn't accomplished anything all night. He listened to the waves. He listened to his own heart, and his eyes were red. He had heard her door close, had seen her hurried steps down the hallway, had seen her shoulders tremble before she turned away. For a moment, he wanted to go after her, wanted to apologize. He wanted to tell her he wasn't cold because he disliked her. He was cold because he was afraid. But his feet were frozen. Sebastian leaned his forehead against the cold glass. A long breath escaped him, heavy with fatigue and something that felt dangerously like regret. Finally, he closed his eyes and forced himself to repeat the vow he clung to, like a lifeline. Distance. Always keep a distance. Because if he allowed himself even one step closer, he knew his heart would love again. And this time he feared he wouldn't survive being abandoned once more. Friday night at the beach house. The wind carried a cold mist, brushing against the glass windows in soft waves like the quiet sigh of the ocean. The whole house was so silent, Emery could hear the ticking clock in the living room counting each second. Slow, steady, painful. After the night she cried herself to sleep. They had barely spoken. She avoided his eyes. He avoided any room she was in. But the distance didn't make the hurt less. It only made it deeper, wider. And tonight, Emery couldn't take it anymore. She stood before Sebastian's office door. Warm yellow light spilled through the gap beneath it, casting his shadow onto the wooden floor. She drew in a long breath, then knocked. "Come in." His voice was low, tired, not sharp and cold like every other day, but strangely soft. Sebastian sat at his desk, sleeves rolled up, the top button of his shirt undone. Not the cold CEO she'd seen at the wedding. Not the silent man from their honeymoon. He was tired. His gray eyes had faint shadows beneath them, his hair slightly messy as if he'd run his hands through it in frustration. The warm desk lamp softened the angles of his face, making him look less like carved granite and more like a real man. Emery? He looked at her with unmasked surprise. She stood there for a few seconds, hands twisting together. Can we talk for a moment? He exhaled and closed his laptop. Okay. It was the first time he shut his laptop. The second, she said, I need something. Emery swallowed the rising knot of emotion in her throat. She stepped closer to the desk but didn't sit. Sebastian tilted his head slightly, studying her as if trying to read her expression. The honeymoon, she began softly, was supposed to be a time for a husband and wife to get to know each other. But we're like strangers. Sebastian didn't respond immediately. I know this is a contract marriage, Emery continued, meeting his eyes. But that doesn't mean I'm not allowed to hope. I've always wanted a marriage built on love. A husband who looks at me like I'm his whole world. A home full of laughter, with kids running around, warm dinners together. Her voice trembled. I know that can't happen overnight, but when you push me away, when you insist on distance, it hurts, Sebastian. His hand tightened slightly on the desk, a reaction she had never seen before. I want a marriage with love, she said, her breath catching. I want to be happy. Even knowing this is a contract, I still hope that maybe, someday, we could become a real family. Then Emery inhaled deeply and admitted the most honest truth of her life. I've never loved anyone before. Not because I didn't want to, but because I never felt safe enough to give someone my heart. I want my first time to belong to someone I trust, someone who could love me, someone I could build a family with. Sebastian's eyes widened, shocked. For the first time, all his coldness vanished. In its place, softness, confusion, and something that looked painfully close to hurt. Sebastian stood. The warm light illuminated the exhaustion on his face, exhaustion he had kept hidden all week. Emery, he said, voice dropping lower, almost like a confession. I never wanted to hurt you. I know I've been awful, cold, distant. He took a few steps toward her. They were only half a meter apart. His eyes didn't look away. I was married before, Sebastian said slowly, and I loved her, very much. But everything fell apart in a way that made me lose faith in myself, in love, in the world. He paused, the memory itself seeming to reopen the old wound. I can't tell you everything, not yet, but what you need to know is, he swallowed, I'm not cold because of you. I'm cold because I don't know any other way to survive. Emery's eyes widened. She hadn't expected that. She hadn't expected him to admit anything at all. Sebastian braced a hand lightly against the edge of the desk behind him, as if to steady himself. I can't promise I'll love you right away. I'm not even sure this heart is still intact. But, for the first time, his voice grew quiet, soft, truly fragile. What you said about family, about laughter, about wanting a marriage built on love, he inhaled. That used to be the thing I wanted more than anything in the world. Emery froze. Sebastian looked down at the floor for a second, as if ashamed of himself. I'm sorry, Emery. His voice roughened. I'm sorry for pushing you away, for hurting you, for not giving you the life you wished for. It was the first real apology he had ever given her. Not polite, not obligatory, a confession. From a man starting to crack open in the deepest place, Emery felt her eyes burn, but she didn't cry. Instead, she stepped forward, the space between them now only wide enough for a touch. Sebastian, she whispered, I don't need you to love me right away. I just need you not to shut everything out. He looked at her for a long moment, and for the first time his face softened, a fragile expression that made Emery want to touch his cheek. I'll try, Sebastian said. 2 simple words. But for a man who had lost faith in love, it was the greatest promise he could give. In the first crack in the icy armor around his heart, the night sea breeze swept across the balcony like cold ribbons of silk, brushing through Emery's hair. She leaned against the railing, arms wrapped around her thin sweater, eyes fixed on the horizon where the ocean melted into the dark. She didn't know when it started, but she had always felt peace when looking at the sea, because every wave reminded her that no matter how shattered her heart became, it still found its way back to shore. A soft footstep sounded behind her. She didn't need to turn around to know it was him. Sebastian's scent, cedarwood and mint, drifted through the air. Strangely, it wasn't as sharp as usual. Tonight it felt softer, warmer. She turned. Sebastian stood there holding 2 glasses of red wine, the warm glow from the bedroom behind him softening every edge of his face. "I thought we needed this." He offered her 1 glass. His voice was low, rough, like speaking to her required more courage than he expected. Emery accepted it. Their fingers brushed, not intentionally, but in that split second, a gentle spark crawled down her spine. Sebastian noticed too. His steel-gray eyes darkened, just slightly but unmistakably. Neither spoke. They didn't need to. The sea breeze, the scent of wine, the sound of waves, the moonlight, all of it nudged them closer, inch by inch. "Do you like the ocean?" Sebastian asked, still looking outward. "Maybe because it's honest," Emery replied, taking a sip. "The waves come and go. They hide nothing." Sebastian let out a quiet laugh, a soft one, thin as moonlight. "I'm not as honest as the ocean," he said, voice tinged with self-mockery. "But tonight, I'm trying." Her voice was gentle as the wind, and she saw it, how her words made him pause just slightly. Another small crack in his armor. The wind picked up, sweeping strands of Emery's hair to the side. She brushed them back, a small, simple gesture. But Sebastian watched her longer than he should have. Long enough that she had to turn and ask, "Is something wrong?" Sebastian set his wineglass down on the small wooden table behind him, slowly, deliberately. Then he stepped forward, closer, close enough that she could hear her heartbeat pounding in her ears. "Emery," he murmured. His voice felt like warm wind against her skin. She looked up. The space between them was no more than a single breath. Sebastian lifted his hand, slowly, touching her cheek. His fingertips were warm. The tenderness of it made her want to cry right where she stood. "I'm sorry for everything this past week has put you through," he whispered, voice barely audible. "I didn't realize you wanted so much from this marriage." "I don't expect you to love me right away," she said, heart hammering. "I just want us to stop avoiding each other." Sebastian exhaled softly, a shaky breath. Then he leaned in. Not fast, not forceful, just asking with his eyes. Emery closed hers. His lips touched hers, not like the required kiss at their wedding. This time it was slow, warm, and tender enough to make her knees weaken. The first touch was feather-light, then deeper, warmer, more certain in their search for each other. Sebastian's hand slid to the small of her back, pulling her closer as if he were trying to keep her in his world after years of pushing everything away. Emery placed her hand against his chest, feeling the strong beat beneath his shirt, and then the kiss shifted into a shaky breath. His or hers. Neither of them knew. When their breaths quickened, when his hand wrapped around her waist and drew her closer, when her chest brushed his, when what lay between them was heat, longing, and 2 lonely souls finally touching. Sebastian suddenly stopped. He opened his eyes, looked straight at her. Before she could ask why, he leaned his forehead against hers and his voice came out broken. "May I continue?" 4 words, as soft as a breath, yet they shattered every wall she had ever built. Emery burst into tears, not from sadness, but because, for the first time in her life, a man asked permission before stepping into her heart. She nodded. Tears were sliding down her cheeks. "Please, continue." There was nothing rushed, nothing rough, nothing desperate or unthinking. It was a night where 2 broken souls found safety in each other. The trembling brush of fingertips, breaths blending, long, deep kisses filled with desire and gentleness. The way Sebastian touched her was as if she were the most delicate thing he had ever held. The way Emery held him was like she was holding a heart that had once been crushed and was now learning how to beat again. A night where 2 lonely people were no longer alone. Their first real night. Morning. The first light slipped through the curtains. The room was quiet, the warmth of skin and breath still lingering in the air. Emery woke first. She turned toward him, smiled softly. Morning sunlight spilled into the bedroom like a promise of a new beginning. But that promise was shattered the second Emery opened her eyes. The pillow beside her was empty. The blanket had been folded, neatly, too neatly for someone who had lived through the softest night of his life. No lingering warmth from Sebastian, no cedar scent from him on the sheets. Only faint traces of a night she had almost mistaken for a miracle. Emery's heart tightened. She slipped on a thin robe and stepped out of the bedroom. Sebastian stood by the marble kitchen island, his tie already knotted, his crisp white dress shirt, and his gray vest perfectly fitted across his shoulders. Cold expression, slicked hair, the sharp gaze of a multi-million-dollar executive. Not a man who had whispered, "May I continue?" with trembling breath. He was reading the newspaper. Steam rose from his coffee, as if last night had never happened. Emery froze at the doorway. He didn't look up. No smile, no greeting, no trace that he had ever lain beside her, ever touched her as if it were something sacred. "You woke up early." She tried to keep her voice steady, though her heart felt like it was falling down a long staircase. Sebastian turned a page, his tone calm. "I have several important meetings." No softness in the way he glanced at her, no echo of the gentle man on last night's balcony. Emery inhaled slowly. "About last night." She didn't get to finish. "Don't misunderstand." His voice cut sharply. "Last night was a physical need." It felt like someone dumped a bucket of ice water over her. Emery stood still, eyes widening, lips trembling. For a few seconds she couldn't breathe. A physical need. Just a need. She let out a short, bitter laugh, cold as winter wind. "Physical?" she repeated, her voice thin and sharp as a blade. "You say that after asking for my permission every step? After trembling when you kissed me? After looking at me as if—" "Emery," he interrupted, so cold the air itself seemed to drop a few degrees. "I think it's best if we keep things exactly as the agreement states. No feelings, no expectations." If he had stabbed her outright, it might have hurt less. Emery stepped back, then another step. She saw herself as the girl who dreamed of a marriage filled with love, of laughter in the kitchen, of children running around, being crushed into dust in this pristine, icy kitchen. But when she spoke, her voice did not shake. It sharpened. It strengthened. A fragile leaf turned into steel. "Sebastian Walker." She said it clearly, forcing him to meet her gaze. His storm gray eyes flickered, just for a second, before returning to their usual calm. "You do not have the right to insult my feelings." No yelling, no crying, no pleading, just a declaration carved from dignity. Only half a second. But Emery saw it, a crack, tiny, real. But he rebuilt his walls quickly. "We both know this marriage was built on an agreement," Sebastian said, voice like cutting wind. "Not emotions." "I understand," Emery replied. She lifted her chin, swallowing all the pain down to the very bottom of herself. "But you also need to understand this. You do not get to treat me like something disposable." Her words made him freeze for a moment, his eyes darkening with something like guilt. But Emery didn't wait for an answer. She turned away. It wasn't until the door closed behind her that the tears finally fell. Not because he rejected her, but because she suddenly saw something clearly. If Sebastian saw her only as a contract, then she would break every expectation he had of her. Not by running away, but by making him see her worth. And when he finally wanted her, when he was ready to open his heart, she would no longer be the girl she was today. Emery wiped her tears, raised her head. Her silent war started now. The morning after everything shattered, Emery stared at herself in the mirror for a long time. Red eyes, a hurting heart. But she was still breathing. And if she could breathe, she knew she could keep living. But not as a shadow Sebastian could touch when he felt like it, and abandon when he didn't. If he wanted distance, she would give him distance. If he wanted a wife without emotion, she would make him see she was not some nameless woman. She would not collapse because of one cold sentence. She would rise, brighter, stronger, more radiant. Emery moved to the east wing of the mansion, the section for VIP guests, big enough to swallow her family's entire old apartment. She didn't choose luxury. She chose light. She chose flowers. She chose life. She began to wake up early to make her own coffee, read on the sunlit balcony, write small notes about her books and stick them on the wall, study business so she could understand Sebastian's world, help the chef in the kitchen, asking how to bake brioche, make souffle, or cook pumpkin soup. The enormous mansion began to recognize her presence not through sorrow, but through the smell of baked pastries, her gentle laughter with the staff, and the East Wing lights glowing late into the night. Emery turned her space into a home, something this house had never known, and everyone noticed. At breakfast, she walked in, greeted Margaret, the head chef, and even the gardener if they were bringing in fresh flowers. And Sebastian? She only gave him a polite nod. "Good morning, Mr. Walker." No soft smile, no searching eyes, no visible hurt. Like two strangers sharing an elevator in a hotel. Very cold, very proper, very unrelated. Sebastian raised a brow, the first sign of surprise that she didn't cling to him. Surprise shifted into irritation, irritation into confusion. When she left the room, her brioche scent still lingering in the air, he found himself looking after her, then wondering why. In all these wide, empty rooms, did it feel like something was missing? He worked in his office, but his eyes often drifted toward the window overlooking the East Wing. He saw her hanging new curtains. He saw her watering plants. He saw her talking to Margaret. He saw her smile, the smile he thought he had extinguished. Every time she smiled, something in his chest tightened. He didn't understand, and he hated not understanding. Another time, walking past the kitchen, he heard her, "Miss Lucy, where did I mess up the recipe? The souffle collapsed again?" Laughter from the staff filled the kitchen. And Sebastian? He stood in the doorway, his hand curling slightly. She blended with people, like light warming a room. And that made him remember. Remember too much. Remember until it hurts. Yeah. That afternoon, while Emery was reading in the East Wing garden, Margaret appeared, clutching her apron as if she was fighting with herself. "Mrs. Walker, I need to speak with you." Emery closed her book. "I'm listening, Margaret." The older woman tightened her grip. "You must understand, Mr. Sebastian is not as cold as you think, and he never meant to hurt you." Emery tried to keep her heartbeat steady. "I don't blame him," she said softly. But Margaret shook her head hard. "No, you must hear this. You must know the truth about Camilla and Caleb." Emery froze. The sea wind blew harder, as if urging the story forward. Margaret looked straight into her eyes, her own filled with tears. "Mr. Sebastian loved Camilla so much he nearly lost himself. He loved her the way a man loves once in a lifetime. But Camilla betrayed him with Caleb, his best friend of 20 years. Emery's throat tightened. She and Caleb had an affair right in their bedroom for years. "Oh my God," Emery whispered shakily. "And the worst part," Margaret's voice cracked, "when Mr. Sebastian caught them, they told him it was his fault. He was too cold, that he didn't deserve to be loved." The entire world tilted around Emery. Margaret continued. "From that day on, his heart broke. Not just broke, shattered. He became terrified. Terrified that anyone he loved again would betray him, the same way terrified that loving meant dying slowly." Her voice trembled. "You're the first person in years to make him feel anything again, and that scares him to death." Emery gripped her book so tightly her nails turned white. Sebastian's cold statement echoed in her mind. It was just physical need. But now she knew. He wasn't cold. He wasn't dismissing her. He was afraid and he was hurting. He wasn't healed, and he coped with that pain by pushing her as far away as possible. Emery stood looking out toward the sea. The wind lifted her hair like flowing silk, and suddenly, every piece fell into place. He didn't refuse to love. He didn't fail to see her. He didn't feel anything. His heart had once been torn apart so violently that whenever she got close, he threw up walls of steel. Emery placed a hand over her chest. "Sebastian Walker," she whispered, "you're not cold. You're just afraid of love." And in that moment, a new resolve rose within her. Not to win him, but because she cared about him. She would not fall, and she would not retreat from the trembling heart of that man. If his heart was broken, she would be the one to piece it back together. 2 months passed like 2 years. The distance between them was no longer a cold war. It was a wound that kept bleeding, a longing that refused to fade, a hunger as persistent as the ocean's endless voice. And then one night, a storm rose. Thunder tore the sky apart. Rain slammed against the windows like thousands of needles. Emery stood in the East Wing hallway, her heart pounding wildly, a strange, sharp sense that something was about to happen. Then she heard footsteps, not steady footsteps, stumbling ones, the steps of a man whose defenses had collapsed. Sebastian appeared at the doorway, drenched, hair dripping against his forehead. The shirt was soaked, clinging to every defined line of his body. His breath was heavy, as if he'd run through a storm inside his own chest. He looked at her, as if the entire world had narrowed down to one person. "Emery." Just one word, but it cracked open like a breath, escaping a heart that had been strangled too long. She stepped toward him. "You walked in the storm? Sebastian, you?" He grabbed her hand. "I love you." 3 words exploded between the pounding rain. Emery froze. Sebastian continued, voice rushed, broken, as though each syllable was tearing through armor he had worn for too many years. "I love you so much. It terrifies me. I'm scared out of my mind. I'm scared you'll leave. Scared I'll love you and lose you the way I once did." His voice shook, for the first time, as if the powerful, untouchable man was placing a once-shattered heart into someone else's hands. "Emery, I don't know how not to lose you. I don't know how to love like a normal person anymore. But he tightened his grip on her hand. "I want you. I need you. I—" Emery brought her hand to his cheek, forcing him to look at her. "Sebastian," she whispered, "you're not cold." She wiped the rain from his cheek as if clearing away the scars of an old burning past. "You're hurt." Sebastian closed his eyes. A droplet, rain or tear, slid down. "And I—" Emery cupped his face with both hands, pulling him closer. "Am here to love that hurt." The rain dripping from his hair mixed with her tears. They stood in the thunderstorm's echo like two surviving souls after a war. Sebastian's voice broke as he pressed his forehead against hers. "I tried running from you, but the more I ran, the more I longed for you, the more I missed you, the more it hurt." She whispered, "Then stop running." And they crashed into each other. No one knew who touched first, whose breath hitched first. The kiss was nothing like the sweet kiss on the balcony, nothing like the gentle, "May I continue?" It was the kiss of someone who had held back too long, of 2 months of suppressed desire, of a storm that could no longer be contained. Their lips collided, deep, fierce, hot as lightning. His hands clutched her waist as if afraid she'd disappear. Her fingers dug into his shoulders, pulling him closer, closer, closer. In the roar of rain, like heaven applauding, they kissed as if both had once died and were coming alive again. He framed her face with both hands. The kiss softened, deeper, heavier, more beautiful. "Emery," his voice was so hoarse it sounded like a prayer. "Let me stay. You already have me." Her voice trembled. "Always." Their breaths mingled, their chests pressed together. The storm outside hammered the windows as if urging them toward the next step. Sebastian lifted her, held her like she was the only sacred thing he had ever carried. She wrapped her arms around his neck, feeling his body tremble, not from cold, but from emotions too big to contain. They entered her room, the door closing behind them, leaving the raging storm outside. Inside, only 2 hearts remained, finding each other after too much loss. That night, there was no hesitation, no walls, no fear of abandonment, only hot breaths, touches deep enough to tremble, whispers that shattered every defense. A night of passion, of aching sweetness, of fire down to the bones, but not simple desire. It was two people loving each other with all the broken pieces they still carried. That night they found each other, and they found themselves. Near dawn, the storm outside began to soften. He pulled the blanket over her, kissed her forehead gently, a vow in the form of a touch. Tomorrow, he whispered into her ear, voice warm as the ocean's hum at shore. I'll love you like a real husband. And for the first time since the wedding, he kept his promise. Emery woke to the soft morning light spilling over the bedroom like a layer of honey. After last night's storm, the sky was strangely clear, blue, warm, peaceful, as if the whole world somehow sensed a miracle had just happened. She shifted gently, only for her heart to stumble. Sebastian was still there, his strong arm wrapped around her waist like an unconscious promise. His cheek rested near her hair. His steady breath brushed the back of her neck, warm and unexpectedly tender. Something she once thought she would never see from him again. Last time, he left, cold as if that night had never happened. But today, he was here, in her arms, as though he never wanted to be anywhere else. A trembling smile curled on Emery's lips. She reached out and touched his mouth lightly, those lips that once shook when he confessed he loved her. He stirred in his sleep, his brow tightening for a moment before relaxing again when she pressed a soft kiss onto his lips. Good morning, she whispered, knowing he was still asleep. And as if sensing her kiss, Sebastian pulled her closer, tightening his hold like a reflex of the heart, not the mind. Emery let out a small breath of laughter, happiness overflowing. Sebastian moved completely into the east wing, not out of obligation or agreement, but because he wanted to wake up next to her every morning. They shared a room, a kitchen, every minute of the day. In the morning, he made coffee and she baked pastries. At noon, they cooked together, his arms wrapped around her waist as he guided her hands while she chopped onions. In the afternoon, they walked through the garden or down to the beach, hand in hand. At night, he held her while they watched movies, his head on her lap, kissing her forehead every time she laughed. And when night fell, they melted into each other as if they had finally found the soul they had lost in another life. No more fear, no more distance. Only love, thick, warm, overwhelming like breath. The Walker mansion had never been so alive. Even Margaret and the staff whispered among themselves, the master and mistress, they love each other like in the movies. And Sebastian, the man once colder than steel, looked at Emery with an expression that made her heart warm long after he smiled. 2 months later, Emery sat up in bed, a hand covering her mouth. She felt nauseous, not stomach pain, not fatigue, a distinct wave of nausea. She rushed to the bathroom, the sound of water, her shaky breathing. Margaret heard it and hurried to the door. Emery, are you all right? Sebastian rushed over from the dressing room, his face paling. What's wrong? Are you hurting? I'll call the doctor. No, no need, Emery whispered, face flushed. She looked at Margaret. Margaret looked back, and for a moment, the entire world froze. How late are you? Margaret whispered. Emery swallowed hard. Almost 2 weeks. All three froze. Test, Sebastian said immediately, his deep voice trembling like distant thunder. We need a test. 5 minutes later, 2 lines. Emery sat on the edge of the bathtub, her hands shaking, eyes burning, and Sebastian. He didn't speak for the first 2 seconds. Then suddenly, he broke down. Not silent tears, not one drop, but real crying, like a man who had just witnessed the one miracle he never dared hope for. Emery! He pulled her into his arms, holding her so tight she could barely breathe. We have a baby. Oh God. He lifted her off the ground and spun her around in the bathroom. Margaret had to jump aside because he was so overwhelmed. She laughed, then cried with him. She didn't know if it was happiness, relief, or because the coldest man she had ever known was holding her and crying like a child who finally learned he was loved. That night, and every night after, Sebastian lay down and kissed her belly, slowly, reverently, tenderly, as if the entire universe lived inside her. Hello, little one. he whispered every evening before sleep, his hand resting over her stomach. Daddy's here. Emery watched him, her heart blooming layer by layer, until it felt like she had no space left to love him more. They began planning the nursery, arguing over names, imagining the future. Laughter, tiny footsteps, mornings with all three of them in the same bed. Sebastian even secretly bought a tiny white hoodie and hid it in the closet, thinking Emery wouldn't notice. He was changing, day by day, little by little, like a man given a second chance at life. And Emery, she felt so happy she sometimes wondered if this was all real. Until one afternoon, the doorbell rang. Margaret went to get the mail and came back pale. Master Sebastian, she said, voice trembling as she set a heavy black envelope on the table. This was sent for you. Sebastian opened it. All color drained from his face. Emery looked at the sheet that slipped out. A legal document, stamped, signed. The line at the top froze the air in the room. Official notification. The divorce between Sebastian Walker and Camilla Pierce was never legally recognized. Emery went still. Sebastian stood frozen, and from the entrance, a familiar voice they thought was gone from their lives, cut through the air like a knife. Sorry for dropping by unannounced, but I think we have something to discuss. Camilla had returned. The front door of the Walker estate opened with a dry, sharp click, a sound that echoed through the wide foyer like the warning bell of a new storm. Not a storm of nature, but a storm carried by a name neither Sebastian nor Emery ever wanted to hear again. She stood there, flawless, like she had been cut out of a haute couture magazine, a fitted black dress to her knees, a cream trench coat draped elegantly over her shoulders, and Louboutin heels tapping against the marble floor like the countdown to an explosion. Her smile, thin, sharp, dripping with familiar disdain, made the air temperature drop several degrees. Well, Camilla's gaze swept across the grand hall. The mansion still feels cozy, just like old times, though I do see there have been personnel changes. Her eyes landed on Emery, who stood beside the dining table, one hand resting lightly on her abdomen unconsciously, instinctively, like a mother protecting her child. Camilla's smile curled upward like the edge of a blade. I'm guessing this is the new one. Emery didn't respond. She didn't need to. She stood straight, didn't flinch, didn't bow her head. Only her heart slammed painfully against her ribs. Each beat a bruise. Camilla strode inside like a longtime owner returning home. She placed her Hermes bag on the table, then slowly pulled out a black folder that smelled of legal threats. She dropped it onto the marble surface with a cold thud. We need to talk, Camilla said, because legally I am still Sebastian Walker's wife. The room seemed to freeze on the spot. Emery felt like she had been slapped straight across the face. Camilla wiggled her fingers, eyes gleaming with mockery. Oh, you didn't know? How tragic. Emery opened her mouth, but no words emerged. A white blankness swallowed every thought. Camilla continued, her tone flat, like she was reading a price list. The divorce between Sebastian and me was never finalized. Administrative error, lost paperwork, legal confusion. Call it whatever you want, bottom line is. She tilted her head. But you are not his wife, and that child you're carrying. Her lips curled, poisonous. Might not even be Sebastian's. The invisible slap across Emery's heart was so brutal her vision blurred for a split second. From the staircase, heavy footsteps sounded. Strong, fast, like an angered lion charging toward danger. Sebastian appeared. He stopped in the middle of the foyer, chest heaving, shirt half-buttoned, face pale, but his storm-gray eyes for the first time burned like steel fresh from the forge. Camilla. Her name left his lips so sharply the whole house seemed to tremble. Camilla turned, wearing the smile that once made Sebastian drop to his knees for love. Today it looked no different than a vengeful phantom. I'm here to— Shut up, Sebastian roared. It was the first time in Emery's life she had ever heard him yell, and quite possibly the first time Camilla had ever faced his real fury. Sebastian stepped forward, positioning himself in front of Emery, a living shield made of bone and will. Don't touch my wife, he growled. His voice was deep, cold, carrying a flame that could incinerate anything in its path. And don't you ever touch my child. Camilla blinked just for a moment, but Emery saw it, a flicker of fear in her eyes. Sebastian didn't retreat. You betrayed me once. You have no right to come back and destroy my new life. Camilla laughed softly, a laugh sharp enough to cut skin. Oh, Sebastian, you're adorable when you're angry, she said, silky and venomous. But the thing is, you don't have a new life, because the old one was never over. Her gaze slid to Emery, then to Emery's belly. And the pregnancy? Camilla tilted her head, eyes as precise as a scalpel. We all know Sebastian isn't exactly trusting. A blow straight to the deepest wound inside him. Emery saw it so clearly that it hurt the flicker in Sebastian's eyes. Small, brief, but real, cold enough to slice her open. She stood behind him. He didn't turn, didn't look at her, and that stiffening of his shoulders, that one needle-thin moment of hesitation, made Emery's heart crack so deeply she could hear it break inside her chest. Camilla saw it too. She smiled victorious like a predator smelling blood. Sebastian kept staring at Camilla, but Emery only looked at him. At the man who made her believe in miracles. At the father who kissed her belly every night. The husband who swore he would love her for real. And in that split-second flicker of doubt, a piece of her heart fell away, crumbling into dust. The storm outside had never truly stopped, but the storm inside the Walker mansion had only just begun. The news exploded overnight. From Boston to New York, from television to social media, headlines burst across every platform. Walker Corporation involved in bigamy scandal? Is Sebastian Walker's second marriage legal? The child in Emery's womb, who is the father? Pictures of Emery leaning on Sebastian's shoulder in the garden, of them holding hands at the market, of him hugging her baby bump. Everything was dragged onto screens, analyzed, dissected, torn apart piece by piece. Even the North Carolina state prosecutor announced an intent to investigate the legal status of the fetus in a marriage that was never officially recognized. Emery read every line, feeling her lungs tighten. She was 7 months pregnant, and she was being taken to court. The day of the hearing, the sky was gray like cooled ash. Emery stepped out of the car with as much calm as she could muster, but Sebastian still felt how cold her hand had become in his. She wore a simple white maternity dress, her hair tied back neatly, her hand resting over her belly, an image so fragile yet so brave that reporters couldn't stop firing their cameras. Across the hallway, Camilla arrived like an actress stepping onto a stage. She wore a pristine cream suit, her hair perfectly blown out, her eyes rimmed in smudged red, as if she'd cried all night. The cruel twist in her smile hid behind a dainty tissue. A perfect victim. Sebastian, Camilla sighed as she approached, I still don't understand why you had to do this to me. Emery stood beside him. She looked straight at Camilla. He didn't do anything to you, Emery said softly but sharply. Camilla smirked. You know nothing. I'm his legal wife, and you are. That's enough, Camilla. Sebastian's voice dropped, cold and sharp as a blade. If you insult Emery again, I'll have you removed from the court. Whispers rippled through the reporters. Camilla rolled her eyes and dabbed her cheek theatrically, like a deeply wounded victim. But as she passed Emery, she hissed, He doesn't believe you, and I'll prove it. Camilla sat at the plaintiff's table, her blonde waves curled perfectly, her expression crafted with just the right amount of sorrow, her hand trembling as she clutched a tissue. The entire courtroom seemed manipulated by her performance. Her lawyer rose. Your Honor, Camilla Pierce, the lawful and never divorced wife of Mr. Sebastian Walker, has been publicly betrayed, replaced by another woman, and now that woman is carrying a child that has no confirmed proof of being Mr. Walker's. The courtroom erupted. Sebastian clenched his fists. Emery closed her eyes for one fragile second. Her lawyer stood. Emery is the victim of an administrative filing error. Nothing more. Just then, Camilla shot to her feet, holding up a stack of photos. Then what is this? She screamed. She met her ex-boyfriend 4 times during her first month of pregnancy. Emery froze. Each photo showed her talking to a tall, brown-haired man, a man who had once been her close friend and her first love. Emery opened her mouth. That is... But Sebastian had already seen them. And in his steel-gray eyes, for that single moment, something darkened. Not anger, not hatred, but doubt. Emery saw it. She saw it clearly, and it punched straight through her chest. Her belly tightened painfully. Sebastian leaned toward his lawyer, speaking quickly and in a low, tense voice, and Emery suddenly knew. He was afraid, and he didn't fully trust her yet, even just a small part, but enough to fracture her heart with a long, aching crack. Tears stung her vision, blurring the courtroom lights. Then the back door swung open. A man walked in, tall, polished, hollow-eyed. Camera flashes exploded. Sebastian shot to his feet. Emery went cold. Caleb, his former best friend, the man who betrayed him with Camilla, the man who helped destroy his life. Caleb stepped onto the witness stand. His hands shook, but his voice was steady. "I'm here to tell the truth." Camilla whipped around. "Caleb, are you insane?" But Caleb faced the judge, and then Sebastian, and finally Emery. "I had an affair with Camilla," he said, each word dropping like a stone, "for years, and Camilla manipulated the divorce filing." The courtroom erupted. I'm sorry, Sebastian," Caleb's voice cracked. "I destroyed everything before, but I won't let her destroy you again." "Don't you dare!" Camilla screamed. The judge slammed the gavel. "Order!" The final verdict fell like a sentence on the ghosts of the past. Camilla Pierce is guilty of legal fraud. Emery Walker is fully exonerated. The marriage between Sebastian and Emery is legally valid from the moment the contract is signed. The press exploded. Margaret covered her face and wept with relief. The courtroom buzzed with celebration. And Emery stood with her hand over her 7-month belly, looking at Sebastian. He rushed to her, pulling her into his arms as if he could shield her from the whole world. He cried, truly cried, the second time Emery had ever seen him break. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll never doubt you again." His voice shook, wet and broken. Emery cupped his face gently. But in her eyes was something that made Sebastian's breath catch. Not anger, not hatred, but a sadness so deep it couldn't be spoken aloud. "Sebastian," she whispered, her voice soft as an invisible blade, "we still love each other." She leaned her forehead against his. "But to love again, we have to rebuild from the beginning." Sebastian's heart clenched painfully, and that was when he understood. The trial was over, but their real test was only just beginning. The sea had calmed after the great storm, and the Walker mansion, once the stage of shouting, tears, and a pitch-black past, now stepped into a new morning. No more reporters at the gate, no more Camilla, no more suspicious stares. Only two people, two deep wounds, and one shared decision. The cream-colored therapy room, a soft sofa, and the faint scent of lavender. Emery sat on one side, Sebastian on the other hand, their hands quietly intertwined. The therapist smiled gently. "You're not here because your marriage is broken. You're here for something better, because you want to protect what you have." Sebastian drew a deep breath, his expression solemn. I'm not good with emotions," he said. "I freeze, avoid, or shut everything down before it has a chance to hurt." Emery looked at him with warmth so soft it made something inside him melt. "That day when Camilla showed me the photos of you and your old friend, I was scared," Sebastian continued, his voice shaking, achingly honest. "Not scared you betrayed me. I was scared. History was repeating. I was scared of losing everything again." The therapist nodded. "Fear doesn't make you weak, it makes you honest." Emery squeezed his hand. "I have something to learn too," she said. "I grew up believing I wasn't good enough to be loved. I thought if someone doubted me, the fault must be mine." She turned to him. "But the truth is, I deserve to be loved. I deserve to be trusted, and I want to believe that with you." Sebastian cupped her cheek, his eyes saying every apology he had never managed to speak fully. In the sessions that followed, they learned, piece by piece, how to say, "I need you," how to admit, "I'm afraid," how to pause when a wound was too deep, how to hold each other instead of pulling away. And slowly, the fractures began to heal. The Walker mansion had once carried the coldness of a museum no one wanted to live in. But under Emery's hands and under Sebastian's gradually softening smiles, it transformed little by little. She chose new wall colors, milky white with a hint of pale gray. Sebastian helped paint, both of them smearing streaks on each other's faces like two mischievous kids. They hung photos, the ocean, their garden walks, the first ultrasound. Sebastian placed a small frame on his desk. Emery standing under a maple tree, hand on her belly, smiling softly like an April breeze. A space once heavy and suffocating now grew warm. Golden lights, soft rugs, cinnamon-scented baked goods, laughter in the kitchen, and gentle jazz every evening. The Walker mansion was no longer a cold house. It became a home. One evening, Emery lay on the sofa, her round belly stretching beneath a pale blue maternity dress. Sebastian walked into the living room, holding a cup of warm honey water. He slowed when he saw her flinch slightly. "Is the baby kicking hard?" he asked softly, concern shining in his voice. Emery smiled. "He's kicking on the left." Sebastian knelt. He didn't touch her immediately. He placed one hand lightly on her belly and pressed his ear gently against it, as if trying to hear a song only the two of them knew. And then, a clear, firm kick. Sebastian froze. Then laughter burst out of him, surprised, joyful, overflowing. "I heard it. Emery, I heard it." His voice broke. She brushed her fingers through his hair, eyes shimmering. "He's saying hi to his dad." Sebastian pressed his lips to her belly, leaving a long, trembling kiss full of love. "Daddy's here, sweetheart." His voice was low, warm, so beautiful it made Emery want to cry. "Daddy's always here." The entire room glowed with a gentle stillness that made time seem to pause. The sky was so blue it looked freshly painted. The sunlight was soft, the wind even softer. Emery looked at the tiny face cradled in Sebastian's arms. Big eyes, a small curved mouth, silky black hair. Sebastian cried. He didn't hide it, didn't restrain it. He held their child close, then leaned down and kissed Emery's forehead. "You're the strongest person in the world," he whispered. "I love you. I love our family." Emery took his hand, tears falling like sunlight spilling over her cheeks. In that moment, they both knew. Every pain, every trial, every wound had led them to this. 4 years later, the Walker mansion rang with laughter. A brown-haired little girl ran circles around the kitchen island. A 3-year-old boy clutched a plastic dinosaur, roaring loudly. A 6-month-old baby lay on the playmat, kicking eagerly as if wanting to join the chaos. In the corner, Sebastian, hair slightly longer, eyes much softer, wore an apron while cooking breakfast. Emery walked in, holding a cup of coffee. Sebastian turned and smiled at her, as if he were seeing her for the first time. "Good morning, love." Emery placed her hand on his waist and kissed him lightly. "They all look like you," he chuckled. "And we're not done yet." 3 children laughed loudly. The sea outside shimmered bluer than ever. A whole family, a love rebuilt from ruins, becoming the most beautiful thing in their lives.